The roar of the truck engine echoed through the dense fog as the vehicle raced along the narrow forest road. The trees stood like silent sentinels on either side, their branches cloaked in morning mist. The headlights cut through the haze, just enough to reveal the curve ahead, but not what waited beyond it. The driver leaned forward, squinting into the white blur, his hand steady on the wheel. Suddenly, something darted across the road, a flash of brown, low to the ground, almost too quick to see. He slammed on the brakes, tires screeching as rubber kissed wet asphalt. But the impact came anyway, a sickening thud that jolted the cabin and made his stomach drop. The truck lurched to a halt. Silence followed, thick and unnatural. Then came a low moan. In the dim light, a small bear cub lay on its side, its tiny body twisted unnaturally, breathing shallow. The driver's heart pounded as he stared, frozen, at the scene before him. And then, from the edge of the woods, the trees parted. A towering shape emerged, slow and deliberate. A full-grown grizzly, her eyes locked on her cub. Every instinct screamed that this was about to turn deadly. But what she did next silenced everything. She did not charge. She did not roar. Instead, the forest bore witness to something no one expected. What she did in the next few minutes changed everything for those watching, and it would go on to touch millions. The forest road wound like a ribbon through the heart of the reserve, a two-lane strip of cracked asphalt barely wide enough for trucks to pass each other without brushing branches. Tall pines rose on either side, their trunks like pillars holding up the sky, and in the early morning hours, a thick fog settled low over the ground, curling through the undergrowth and blurring the edges of the world. It was the kind of road that felt forgotten by time, the kind that kept its own secrets hidden just beyond sight. Lucas knew it well. He'd been driving this route for years, delivering supplies to ranger stations, research camps, and scattered forest outposts. He loved the silence out here, the way the air smelled of damp earth and pine sap, and how the stillness made everything feel sacred. He wasn't like the other drivers who treated the forest like an obstacle. Lucas drove slowly, his hands always light on the wheel, his eyes scanning the trees, not just for movement but for life. He respected this place. That morning, though, something felt off. The fog was heavier than usual, thick enough that he could barely see 20 feet ahead. His headlights cast short beams that seemed to dissolve into the mist. The forest was unusually quiet. No birds, no rustling in the underbrush, just the hum of the engine and the occasional creak of the truck's suspension. Lucas kept one hand near the brake, knowing the animals in this part of the forest didn't care about roads or vehicles. They crossed when they pleased. Deer, foxes, even the occasional moose had wandered out in front of him before. But this morning felt different. The silence didn't just surround him. It pressed in, as if something waited up ahead, just beyond the veil of fog. Through the wall of fog, something shifted. A sudden flicker of motion to the left caught Lucas's eye, a dark shape, low to the ground, bursting from the trees and sprinting across the road. His heart lurched as instinct took over. He slammed both feet onto the brake. The tires shrieked in protest, the front of the truck dipping forward violently. But the figure was too close. There wasn't enough distance. Not enough time. The moment stretched. The front bumper struck the small body with a dull, gut-wrenching thud. The cub was flung several feet forward, twisting mid-air like a rag doll before landing in a crumpled heap near the edge of the road. It skidded slightly on the slick surface before coming to a stop, unmoving. Lucas sat still, the engine now idling beneath him like an unwelcome heartbeat. His breath caught. His hands gripped the wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. He stared through the windshield, disbelief settling over him like a second fog. The shape on the road was a bear cub, tiny, not long separated from its mother. Its small chest rose and fell in shallow gasps. One paw twitched slightly. Lucas couldn't move, couldn't speak. The guilt came crashing in, sharp and immediate, cutting deeper than anything he'd ever felt behind the wheel. Then, as if summoned by the moment, the forest stirred again. Branches rustled at the tree line. A heavy shape began to emerge, slow and deliberate. The fog swirled as a massive grizzly stepped onto the road. Her body was silent but powerful, her eyes locked on the small form ahead. She didn't hesitate. She didn't roar. She walked calmly to her cub and knelt beside it, lowering her head until their foreheads touched. Lucas expected fury. He expected chaos. But what unfolded was neither rage nor revenge. It was something entirely unexpected. It was grief. It was grace. And it was only just beginning. The mother bear reached her cub with slow, careful steps, as if the world beneath her paws had turned fragile. She lowered her massive body beside the small bundle of fur, moving with a tenderness that felt impossible for something so powerful. Her snout brushed against the cub's side, once, then again, as if coaxing it back to life with the softest of pleas. She didn't roar. She didn't lash out at the truck, just feet away. Instead, she sat down beside her injured child and waited. The forest, which had already fallen quiet, now seemed to hold its breath. Not a single bird sang. Not a single branch stirred. Even the wind seemed to retreat, allowing the moment to exist without interruption. It was as if the trees themselves understood that something sacred was unfolding, that this was not a moment for noise, but for reverence. Lucas remained frozen in his seat, heart thudding in his chest. His hands, which had once been steady from years behind the wheel, now trembled against the dashboard. The dashcam light blinked quietly, capturing every second. He didn't reach for his phone. He didn't start the truck. He couldn't. He watched, helpless and humbled, as the bear gently nudged her cub again, her head lowering close, as if whispering something only they could hear. She didn't leave. She didn't run. She simply stayed, her great body curled around the tiny frame, eyes never leaving her cubs. Time slowed with her. Grief settled across the road like fog, thick and silent. Lucas had seen mothers in emergency rooms, in accident scenes, in the aftermath of natural disasters. He had seen the way they knelt, how they pleaded, how they hoped even when hope was gone. This bear, this wild, untamed force of nature, was doing the same. There was no rage in her, only heartbreak, only love. And in that moment, there was no difference between the mother in the forest and any mother anywhere in the world. Lucas finally managed to reach for his radio, his voice barely steady as he reported the accident to the local ranger station. He gave his location, described what had happened, and tried to find the right words to explain what he was seeing. 20 minutes later, a ranger truck pulled up quietly behind his, headlights dimmed. From its stepped a seasoned forest ranger and a wildlife veterinarian, both moving with practiced caution. They stopped short when they saw her. The mother bear had not moved. She was still lying beside her cub, her massive body curled protectively around the tiny figure. The cub's breathing was labored but steady. The vet could see it from a distance, injuries that would only worsen without intervention. But the scene ahead was delicate. One wrong move, and the bear might panic. Or worse. The ranger raised his binoculars, focusing on her face. Her eyes blinked slowly, but they were not scanning for threats. Her breathing, deep and rhythmic, filled her chest and moved through her body like waves. She was not posturing. She was not defending. She was simply present, anchored to the moment and the cub she could not heal. The team set up quietly in the underbrush, speaking only in whispers. Every motion was deliberate. No one approached the road. The plan, for now, was to watch, to wait, because approaching too soon could force a tragic ending. She showed no signs of aggression, only sorrow. Her body shifted now and then, nudging the cub with her snout, then resting still again. It was grief in its rawest form, the kind that stripped everything else away. The ranger lowered his binoculars slowly. She's not protecting, he thought. She's mourning. And they had no idea how to help without shattering the fragile trust that lingered in the air. The tension among the rescue team thickened as the minutes dragged on. The cub's breathing was shallow, its body barely able to move. The vet exchanged glances with the ranger, knowing that every second mattered. Internal bleeding, fractures, shock. Any of these could take the young bear's life if they didn't act soon. But the mother's presence changed everything. No one wanted to provoke a reaction that might end in tragedy for her, the cub, or themselves. They whispered hurried debates from behind the cover of brush. One option was to fire a tranquilizer at the mother, but the risks were high. It could miss. It could trigger her into panic. Worse, it could scare her into dragging the cub deeper into the forest, away from help. But doing nothing could mean the cub slipping beyond saving. Then, without warning, the mother bear shifted. She rose slowly, towering above the cub for a moment, then leaned down and gave it one last gentle nudge. She didn't pick it up. She didn't cry out. Instead, she turned her head toward the trees and began walking away. A few paces in, she paused behind a thick pine trunk and settled there, half hidden, her eyes still fixed on the scene unfolding on the road. Then something even more astonishing happened. The cub, weak and trembling, shifted slightly in the direction of the humans. It was barely a movement, but it was enough. The vet crouched, frozen mid-step. The ranger slowly lifted his binoculars again, tracking the mother's gaze. Her posture was still, watchful, but not defensive, not possessive, not anymore. The ranger exhaled quietly, almost in awe. "She knows," he whispered. In that single action, stepping back and allowing her cub to be touched by human hands, the mother bear had done something no textbook, no documentary, no field training had ever prepared them for. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't fear. It was trust, pure and deliberate, a decision made not by instinct, but by love. The moment the mother bear faded into the shadows of the trees, the rescue team sprang into motion. The vet moved swiftly but gently, kneeling beside the small, broken form of the cub. Her hands were steady. Her voice low as she murmured reassurances meant more for herself than the unconscious bear. One leg was clearly fractured, twisted at an unnatural angle. Ribs along the side were bruised, some possibly cracked. There was blood along the snout and a small gash near the shoulder. But the cub was still breathing, still alive. Every movement had to be fast, but careful. The ranger kept watch with binoculars trained on the trees, but the mother didn't return. She was there, just beyond sight, watching, not interfering, just watching. As the cub was gently placed in a padded crate and lifted into the back of the ranger truck, Lucas finally stepped out of his cab. His legs were shaky beneath him, his breath still shallow. He turned toward the woods, eyes scanning the shadows until they met hers. There she stood, half hidden behind a fallen log, her head low, her gaze fixed not on the people, but on the box being loaded into the truck. She didn't move, didn't growl. Her entire body was still, yet in her eyes, something ancient stirred. Lucas held her gaze for a few seconds, and in them, he found no rage, only pain and trust. The vet climbed into the passenger seat and spoke quietly, almost reverently. "She's letting us help." The truck engine turned over, a low rumble breaking the solemn silence. As it began to move forward, the mother bear stepped onto the road and followed. Her pace was slow, steady. She didn't run. She didn't cry out. She followed the vehicle for nearly half a mile, padding along the edge of the pavement like a ghost. Then, as the forest opened wider, she stopped. She stood in the middle of the road, her figure silhouetted against the mist, and watched the truck disappear into the distance. Not with fear, not with resistance, but with the silence of a mother who had chosen to believe. Back in the forest, the world carried on, but the mother bear did not. Rangers patrolling the area noticed her often, always near the same stretch of road, never far from the place where her cub had fallen. She didn't hunt with urgency. She didn't roam with purpose. Her movements were slow, deliberate, bound not by instinct, but by memory. She stayed close to the edge of the forest where the trees met the road, returning to the same grove every few days. Sometimes she lay down for hours beneath a canopy of pine, her head resting on her paws, eyes watching the curve in the road where the truck had once disappeared. She didn't appear injured. She wasn't ill. But something in her had changed. One of the rangers, moved by her constancy, began documenting her silent vigil. From a respectful distance, he snapped photos, her silhouette in the mist, her body curled beneath the trees, her gaze cast toward the empty path. He shared them online, each time captioning them with quiet reverence. One photo went viral, a shot of her standing alone in a clearing at sunrise, golden light on her back, unmoving, almost statuesque. The caption simply read, "The Mother Who Waited." People around the world began calling her Faith. Faith became more than a bear. She became a symbol of devotion, of grief, of hope wrapped in silence. Comments flooded the ranger's page, words of empathy, of awe, of recognition. Some wrote that they saw their own loss in her stillness. Others said they had never believed animals could feel this deeply, until now. And still Faith waited, not because she expected anything, but because love sometimes anchors us to places long after others have gone, because her cub had left from that road, and a mother never forgets where she last saw her child. Weeks passed. Hope's strength returned, and with it, her wild instincts. Her injured leg healed faster than expected, and soon she was climbing, exploring, and responding to scents with the curiosity only the forest could answer. But there was one part of her recovery that no fence could contain, something that lived beyond the walls of the rescue center. The pull of a bond not broken, only paused. The rescue team knew the time had come. They had been tracking Faith's movements quietly, mapping the places she returned to most. One spot stood out, a small clearing by a slow-moving stream, surrounded by tall grasses and shaded by towering pines. It was peaceful, tucked away, and untouched by people. She had been seen there more than a dozen times, always alone. At dawn, the team transported Hope in a secure travel cage, the truck moving carefully over dirt trails. When they reached the stream, they moved quickly, silently, setting the crate in the soft earth and unlocking the gate. Then they stepped back. Cameras rolled. Binoculars were raised, and everyone held their breath. The gate opened with a soft click. Hope hesitated. Her nose twitched as the smells of her birthplace filled her senses. A moment passed. Then she stepped out, cautiously at first, then with purpose. She padded into the clearing, small and brave, heading straight for the stream. Then, from the trees, something moved. No growl, no roar. Just the sound of leaves parting as Faith emerged. Her massive form stepped into the light. She paused. The cub froze, then ran. They met in the middle of the clearing, heads low, steps slow, then quicker, until they pressed together, forehead to forehead, without a sound. No ceremony, no human interpretation needed. From behind the camera, the ranger lowered his binoculars. His voice cracked as he whispered. She waited. And everyone watching knew the truth. This wasn't just reunion. It was recognition. A promise kept by a mother who had never stopped believing. In the weeks that followed the reunion, Faith and Hope were seen often, wandering together along the tree-lined edges of the forest, foraging near streams, or resting in open meadows beneath the same sky that had once divided them. Rangers monitored from a respectful distance, careful not to interfere, but unable to look away. Their bond hadn't just resumed, it had deepened. Hope followed her mother closely, mimicking her movements, learning again what it meant to be wild. And Faith, once frozen in grief, now moved with a quiet assurance, her purpose renewed. The story didn't fade. If anything, it grew stronger. Videos of their reunion spread across the internet, accompanied by stills of Faith waiting on the roadside, of Hope limping toward a second chance. Wildlife groups used the images to call for change. They spoke not just of bears, but of roads that cut through lifelines, of lives lost quietly beneath wheels and headlines. Their message was simple. If a mother bear can trust, can hope, can wait, then surely people can act. Local lawmakers took notice. Discussions began about creating wildlife corridors through high-traffic areas, installing animal overpasses, and adding signage to alert drivers. Donations increased for ranger stations and rescue facilities. Schools used Faith and Hope's story to teach empathy, not just for each other, but for the world that breathes beyond city walls. What began as a tragedy had transformed into something bigger than either of them. It became a call to protect not only the creatures who walk the wild edges, but the emotions they carry. And deep in the forest, where two bears once stood separated by fear and metal and silence, now walked something whole again. A mother, a daughter, a symbol, a story that would never be forgotten. Faith didn't bare her teeth. She didn't lash out or flee. She did something far more courageous. She let go. In a world governed by instinct, where survival often means solitude and silence, she chose trust. Not because she had to, but because something deeper moved within her. The kind of knowing that doesn't come from instinct alone, but from love. the kind that sees beyond species, beyond fear, beyond the wild itself. Hope's survival wasn't just a medical success. It was a quiet revolution. It proved that love exists not only in the safety of homes or the tenderness of human hands, but in the dense woods, in the quiet watches of night, in the hearts of creatures most would never expect to feel. Her recovery gave the world more than a reason to cheer. It gave us a reason to reflect, because what happened on that lonely stretch of road wasn't just a rescue. It was a revelation, a lesson written not in textbooks, but in footsteps, in a mother who refused to leave, in a cub who learned to stand again, in a forest that held its breath and then, ever so gently, exhaled. The world is noisy. It's full of fences and fast-moving things. But somewhere, deep in the quiet heart of the forest, two bears remind us that sometimes the most human moments aren't human at all. Sometimes they come from the wild, and sometimes they come when we choose to listen. If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing to our channel. We share true, untold stories where nature meets emotion and where the wild reminds us what love really means. Every like, comment, and share helps us bring more of these moments to light and helps protect those who can't speak for themselves. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and never stop believing in the quiet miracles of the forest.